Gud, det ser ut som att de kommer från en helt annan tid, eller hur?
Precis.
Ja. Du kollar. Är han naken?
Gud.
Så. Riktigt. Det händer inte. Filmar du det här eller?
The problem was the fact that once he had been convicted,
You stayed with him.
I stayed with him, and that's the bit that as it were, I kick myself for on a daily basis, because it was not something that was becoming of a member of the royal family, and we try and uphold the highest standards and practices, and I let the side down. Simple as that.
One of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Roberts,
Yeah.
has made allegations against you. She says she met you in 2001. She says she dined with you, danced with you at Tramp nightclub in London. She went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell, your friend. Your response?
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
You don't remember meeting her?
No.
Prince Philip is not good. He's not a good character. He's virtually going to go down in history as the Black Prince. His family were kicked out of Greece, and he was brought out of Greece in an orange box when he was just a baby, just a few months old. And when he met Princess Elizabeth, she was 14 and he was 18, and it was as he had just joined the Navy. He had 2 suits and 20 quid in his pocket, but and the introduction was done by Lord Louis Mountbatten, who was then about 39, and Winston Churchill at the time was the father was about 64. Prince Philip got involved in heroin trafficking, and he got involved in pedophilia. Which first? Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip were due to go on a world tour, and they're due to go to New Zealand in 1952. But King George VI died, so she got crowned and the world tour was delayed a year. They went to New Zealand, and they went to Lake Rotoiti and stayed in Moose Lodge from the 1st to the 4th of February 1954. Now the pedophilia and the heroin go hand in hand, and that those who supplied children to Prince Philip were then invited into the heroin trafficking ring. And the heroin trafficking was done through the Navy, and it was done using sonar buoys, which were called seahorses. So the pedophilia story that I've heard from intelligence in 1954, 1st to the 4th of February at Moose Lodge in Lake Rotoiti, was that Prince Philip used to wear a rabbit suit, and the children were given scopolamine, which is an inhibition inhibitor and a memory loss agent. And the children were selected from parents who were compromised or could be compromised. And after that, when they left New Zealand, you can see them at Auckland getting onto the Sunderland Plain, and Queen Elizabeth was walking 10 paces in front of Prince Philip. And it was generally considered at that time, 2 years after they'd been married, that the marriage was over. Those who supplied Prince Philip with children were then invited into his heroin trafficking ring, and that was called the triumvirate. And triumvirate is Latin for 3 people who are running a loosely organised organisation, with no particular rules. It's an affiliation, but in this case it was essentially a mafia. So Prince Philip was involved in heroin trafficking using the Navy.
Hello, this is Kevin Annett on December 1st, and I'd like to read to you a couple of reflections I wrote about events that happened to me this past week. It's entitled 3 Stories, 3 Children, on the Requiem Road. The elderly native man stares at the white woman across the table of the Greasy Spoon in Kamloops, British Columbia, where they both wait for a bus. It is November 25th, 2010. His name is George. I lived my whole life on a reserve just south of Calgary, he says. As a young boy, I got taken to the Catholic residential school north of us. That's where I got all of these. The man lifts his shirt and reveals deep scars on his chest and arms. Another deep furrow runs across his head. But that wasn't the worst. It happened one night in winter, cold as hell and blowing hard. These 3 little girls from our reserve had all been raped by the head priest. The oldest girl was only 7. The others must have been 5 or 6. The eldest one said to the others they had to run away. They was just in little cotton nightgowns, no shoes or nothing. But they escaped and ran off into that blizzard. The man looks down and shakes his head. They didn't get more than a mile. I was on the search team that found them. All 3 of them were still holding each other's little hands, lying face down in the snow. When we reached him, the priest, the guy who had raped them, got all mad and started cursing like he was mad at them. That's when I saw the oldest girl start moving. She weren't dead. But when the priest saw her move, she told me to just leave her there. He turned away from her and left her there, dying in the snow. The man is about to continue when his bus arrives. I couldn't leave her there, he begins. He turns to his wife, who has sat next to him the entire time, nodding sadly. We gotta go, he says to the white woman. Far to the west, a day later, William Coombs shuffles into the Ovaltine Cafe on Vancouver's Hastings Street, Skid Row, with his few belongings stuffed in a backpack. He nods and smiles at me, for we haven't seen each other in weeks. I've been drinking again, really bad, he begins apologetically, for he knows how much I rely on him, and how he relies on that reliance. The memories again? I ask. Yeah, but it's like, now I ain't got nowhere to talk about it. Not now, with your radio show gone. That was the way I got by, talking on the show. I nod, remembering with more than anger how his lifeline was severed so brutally. I say quickly, I've got a new show, a blog radio program. You have to come on it. He looks at me wearily, then reaches into his bag and extracts a nearly empty bottle and swigs from it. We let the minutes tick by, hoping for something. Finally, William says, Remember when the Queen came to our school? How she took away those 10 kids? Yeah, I checked on that. She was definitely in BC in the fall of '64. I remember their names, some of them, the boys. I pull out my notepad. There was Harvey and Ralph Parker, Métis boys from Lytton. They were in the group taken away by the Queen and Philip after the picnic at Dead Man's Creek. 5 other boys went, and 3 girls. They were all in the smart group in school. The 10 children were never seen again. You remember anything else, William? I asked. He nods sadly. George Adolphe and Ralph Arnoux, they were with me that day. They saw the kids taken away, and how she made 'em all kiss her foot. What? The Queen had on these white gloves, and she put out her foot and told all those 10 kids they had to kiss it. They all did. William shuddered and started coughing. I started talking about it the next day in school, said it wasn't right. Then the nun told me if I said anything against the Queen, I'd get killed for it. I stopped jotting notes and looked at him carefully. There's more, isn't there? The man nodded. I seen Brother Murphy throw that epileptic boy off the fire escape 3 stories up. Murphy did that to a bunch of kids. How many? William screws up his eyes and stutters. Happen all the time. I'd say 15, 20. He killed that many kids? Sure. Nobody survives that kind of fall. Murphy burned a few of them in the school furnace. I saw him do it once. William wouldn't eat anything that day. I managed to get some oatmeal into him, but he quickly threw it up into a urinal. That night, waiting for a bus on Hastings Street and sheltering from the rain, I encountered Josephine, an Aboriginal prostitute I've known for years. Somehow, she's still alive, although tonight she was bleeding from a new wound to her forehead. Eduardo did it. I still owe him. She sat next to me in the bus cubicle, watching warily for the Guatemalan pimp and drug dealer who rules a 2-block stretch of Hastings Street as his personal fief. The cops don't go near him. Rumor has it that he used to be a political activist in his homeland. Now he murders people. Killed Francine by jumping on her head over at the Patricia, recounted Joe to me once years ago. She owed him $50. Made the mistake of telling him off. Joe was cold that night, and I offered her my coat. She smiled shyly and declined. "Are you safe?" I asked. She just tilted her head at the stupidity of the question, but being native, said nothing. After a few minutes, she stood and prepared to leave me, but mumbled, "You be careful, Kev. Nobody's talking nowadays. We've been told not to." "Told by who?" I asked. She looked frightened for the first time. A cop car drove by and slowed down. She hurried away into the wet night. www.hiddenfromhistory.org. Pass it on.
Well, first of all, this is from a very credible source. It's a member of Parliament. It's somebody who has been providing us some very important information over the last 4 years, about the work we're doing and the impact it's having. And he made it clear that his information was that they were considering it on the basis that the work we're doing is hitting very close to home, obviously. And it's no accident that it was announced that this sedition order was being considered the very week that we exposed, if you remember the announcement that came last Monday, when Joseph Ratzinger went to London, the first visit of a pope to England in history. On September 16th, 2010, he went to Holyrood Castle to meet with Queen Elizabeth, and they were closeted in there for about a day or two. It turns out that from the same source, we discovered that Queen Elizabeth actually agreed to place all Anglican clergy under the Catholic policy known as Crimen Solicitanus. That basically orders Anglican priests now, along with Catholic priests, to cover up child abuse. What she just did by that was violated her coronation oath, where she swore to protect the citizens of England. She has agreed now to cover up child rape. This is like an official criminal conspiracy. And naturally, us exposing that puts them in a really dangerous position. She should, under British law now, be forced to abdicate, she and all her heirs, because she's, completely committed treason, in effect. Now, their backs are obviously to the wall on this, and they are now obviously getting some advice that I should be permanently silenced, because in order to stop this, which could lead to a whole chain of events which could topple the whole British monarchy. So, I'm not surprised in a way they're acting that way, but they've been striking at people around me as well. If you remember, 3 of our members over the last little while have been put in British or Canadian prisons on trumped-up charges. One man was put in a mental hospital for 3 days until we got him out, the fellow in London, David Compan. So, they've been hitting around us, but definitely this is aimed at trying to, stop this exposure of the direct link between the Vatican and the Crown in protecting child rapists around the world.
The man you mentioned is a High Court Justice in England. His name's Adrian Fulford. He's 61 years old. He's one of the top judges of the High Court in England. He's a direct advisor to Queen Elizabeth. He advises her on constitutional matters. He's also a notorious protector of child rapists. He is part of a group called PI, Pedophile Information Exchange, which the police in England have named as one of the main agencies for linking child rapists. They say it's one of the Scotland Yard inspectors was quoted as saying it's an industrial level of child raping activity going on. In other words, it's a massive network. And this Judge Adrian Fulford, so-called Lord Adrian Fulford, is right in that very deeply. He's organized. He was one of the original organizers of this PI group.
He's held, when he was younger, he organized protests to defend the right of child rapists. And he is get this, he has publicly advocated that the age of consent be lowered to 4. In other words, it would be legal for children as young as 4 to have sex. I mean, this is mind-boggling. It's a crime. And clearly, regardless of his position, he is guilty as a citizen for aiding and abetting child rape. And the amazing thing about this man is Tony Blair attempted to have him knighted. He became a Queen's Counsel in 1994, and he's a serving judge in the International Criminal Court.